Hello and welcome. Dear students, today we are going to discuss an important topic, that is wetland ecosystems. In this lecture, we will be learning about the objectives of introduction and definition of wetlands, component and types of wetlands, hydrophysical forms of wetlands, functions and values of wetlands, ecosystem services of wetlands, threats and restoration of wetlands, and role of Ramsar Convention and mission for wetlands conservation. First of all, let we try to know about the definitions of the wetlands. By the definition of wetlands, which are defined as areas where a water table is at, near or just above the surface and where soils are water saturated for a sufficient length of time, such that the excess water and resulting low soil oxygen levels are principal determinants of vegetation and soil development. From an ecological perspective, either an abundance of hydrophytes or indicators of hydric soil conditions is generally sufficient to indicate a wetland ecosystem. The boundary of the wetland is identified by changes in vegetation structure, loss of hydrophytes and wetland soil characteristics. Or we can define wetland as an area where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil all year or for varying periods of time during the year, including during the growing season. We may also define wetlands as land transitional between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, where the water table is usually at or near the surface or the land is covered by shallow water. Some 100 countries have adopted a definition by signing the Ramsar Convention on wetlands. In the text of the convention, wetlands are defined as areas of marsh, fen, peatland or water, whether natural or artificial, permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing, fresh, brackish or salt, including areas of marine water, the depth of which at low tide does not exceed 6 meters. Indeed, wetlands are found from the tundra to the tropics and on every continent except Antarctica. Interesting fact is about Ramsar sites. The Ramsar sites are one of the major protected areas in the world. There are 2,414 Ramsar sites in the world. In 1974, the world's first Ramsar site was identified in Cobourg Peninsula, Australia. With 175 Ramsar sites, the United Kingdom has the largest number of such sites in the world. February 2nd is celebrated as the International Wetlands Day. These sites are maintained in Montreux's record to track any major ecological changes that might affect any of the wetland sites positively or negatively. In India, there are 46 Ramsar sites with a surface area of about 10,81,438 hectares as of December 2020. And Chilka Lake is the largest Ramsar site of India with a surface area of about 1,16,500 hectares. Chilka Lake in Orissa and Kyoledio National Park, Rajasthan, were recognized as the first Ramsar sites of India. Uttar Pradesh has the largest number of Ramsar sites in India with 8 Indian wetlands. Renuka wetland in Himachal Pradesh is the smallest wetland of India, a surface area of 20 hectares. Now, let us discuss some components of the wetlands. In trying to categorize the wide range of wetlands encompassed by the Ramsar definition, defined 30 groups of natural wetlands and 9 man-made ones. However, for illustrative purpose, it is possible to identify 5 broad wetland systems. Number 1, estuaries, where rivers meet the sea and salinity is intermediate between salt and fresh water. For example, deltas, mudflats, salt marshes. Then marine, not influenced by river flows, for example, shorelines and coral reefs. Then riverine, that is the land periodically inundated by river overtopping, for example, water meadows, flooded forests, oxbow lakes. Then palustrine, where there is more or less permanent water, for example, papyrus swamp, marshes, fen, etc. And another one is lacustrine, those areas of permanent water with little flow, for example, ponds, kettle lakes, volcanic crater lakes, etc. Now, let us discuss some types of wetlands. Each wetland differs due to variations in soil, landscape, climate, water regime, vegetation and human disturbance. The major types of wetlands found in the United States are organized into 4 general categories, that is marshes, swamps, bogs and fens. Now, discussing about the marshes, marshes are periodically saturated, flooded or ponded with water and characterized by herbaceous, that is non-woody vegetation adapted to wet soil conditions. Marshes are further categorized as tidal marshes and non-tidal marshes. Now, tidal marshes, that is coastal marshes, occur along coastlines and are influenced by tides and often by fresh water from runoff, rivers or groundwater. Salt marshes are the most prevalent types of tidal marshes and are characterized by salt tolerant plants such as smooth cordgrass, salt grass and glasswort. Then non-tidal or inland marshes. These are dominated by herbaceous plants and frequently occur in poorly drained depressions, floodplains and shallow water areas along the edges of lakes and rivers. Then freshwater marshes. These are categorized by periodic or permanent shallow water, little or no peat deposition and mineral soils. They typically derive most of their water from surface waters, including flood water and runoff. Then wet meadows commonly occur in poorly drained areas such as shallow lake basins, low-lying depressions and the land between shallow marshes and upland areas. Precipitation serves as their primary water supply, so they are often dry in the summer. Then discussing about the wet prairies, these are similar to wet meadows but remain saturated longer. Wet prairies may receive water from intermittent streams as well as groundwater and precipitation. Then prairie potholes. They develop when snow melt and rain fill the pockmarks left on the landscape by glaciers. Groundwater input is also important. Then playas. Playas are small basins that collect rainfall and runoff from the surrounding land. These low-lying areas are found in the southern high plains of the United States. Then vernal pools or vernal ponds. These have either bedrock or a hard clay layer in the soil that helps keep water in the pool. They are covered by shallow water for variable periods from winter to spring, but may be completely dry for most of the summer and fall. Then number second are swamps. The swamps are fed primarily by surface water inputs and are dominated by trees and shrubs. Swamps occur in either freshwater or saltwater floodplains. They are categorized by very wet soils during the growing season and standing water during certain times of the year. Swamps are classified as forested shrub or mangrove. Now, forested swamps. These are found in broad floodplains and receive flood water from nearby rivers and streams. Then shrub swamps. These are similar to forested swamps, except that shrubby species like button bush and swamp rose dominate. Now, mangrove swamps. Mangrove swamps are coastal wetlands characterized by salt-tolerant trees, shrubs and other plants growing in brackish to saline tidal waters. Then another type, that is bogs. Bogs are freshwater wetlands which are characterized by spongy peat deposits, a growth of evergreen trees and shrubs and a floor covered by a thick carpet of sphagnum mosses. These systems, whose only water source is rainwater, are usually found in glaciated areas of the northern United States. Then another type, that is fens. Fens are groundwater fed peat forming wetlands covered by grasses, sedges, reeds and wildflowers. Willow and birch are also common. Now, discussing about the hydrophysical forms of wetlands. In hydrophysical forms of wetlands, we have fluvial, that is sites occurring beside and influenced by streams and rivers. Then lacustrine, those sites occurring in the flooded zones of lakes. Wetlands not associated with rivers or lakes can be grouped into three major forms: ponds and potholes. The sites associated with small water bodies usually dominated by shallow open water or marsh ecosystems. Then slopes. Sites on slopes with abundant near surface seepage derived from groundwater or precipitation. Then basins. Sites in depressions and other topographic low points that receive water mainly from groundwater and precipitation and have little standing water, usually dominated by peatland ecosystems. Now, let us discuss some of the major functions and values of wetlands. Wetlands were once considered useless, disease-ridden places, for example, malaria and yellow fever, that were to be avoided. We now realize that wetlands provide many benefits to society, such as fish and wildlife habitats, natural water quality improvement, flood storage, shoreline erosion protection, opportunities for recreation and aesthetic appreciation, and natural products for our use at little or no cost. Protecting wetlands can in turn protect our health and safety by reducing flood damage and preserving water quality. Wetlands can be thought of as biological supermarkets. They produce great quantities of food that attract many animal species. Numerous species of birds and mammals rely on wetlands for food, water, and shelter, especially while migrating and breeding. Many animals need wetlands for part or all of their life cycles. Wetlands also play an important role in the hydrologic cycle. Wetlands can receive, store, and release water in various ways. Physically through groundwater and surface water, as well as biologically through transpiration by vegetation, and therefore function in this very important global cycle. They also are a source of substantial biodiversity in supporting numerous species from all of the major groups of organisms, from microbes to mammals. Let us now discuss the services of wetlands, which we call ecosystem services of wetlands. Wetlands provide a wide range of ecosystem services vital for human well-being, which relates to the benefits people obtain from ecosystems. The services include provisioning services, that is, wetlands produce an array of vegetation, animal, and mineral products that can be harvested for personal and commercial use. Perhaps the most significant of these is fish, and providing employment and income for at least 150 million people through fishing industry. Rice is another important food staple and accounts for 1/5 of total global calorie consumption. Wetland products also include fuel wood, animal fodder, horticultural peat, traditional medicines, fibers, dyes, and tannins. Now, discussing about the regulating services of the wetlands. Wetlands regulate several important ecosystem processes. 3 regulating services are globally significant, namely water quality improvement, flood abatement, and carbon management. Wetlands purify water, which is why they are often called nature's kidneys, through storing nutrients and other pollutants in their soils and vegetation, and trapping sediments. All wetlands help prevent nutrients from reaching toxic levels in groundwater used for drinking purposes and reduce the risk of eutrophication of aquatic ecosystems. Wetlands are natural frontline defenses against catastrophic weather events, providing a physical barrier to slow the speed and reduce the height and force of floodwaters. Wetlands play an increasingly recognized role as climate regulators and in sequestering and storing carbon. Healthy, intact peatlands retain significant amounts of carbon as peat, whereas drainage, peat extraction, and burning release it into the atmosphere in the form of greenhouse gases. Wetlands can function as a climate change safety net to mitigate climate change impacts, provided they are protected, maintained, and restored on a global scale. Now, let us discuss the habitat services or supporting services of wetlands. Habitat services, for example, life cycle maintenance, that is nursery services, and gene pool protection are necessary for sustaining vital ecosystem functions and the production of all other ecosystem services. Although wetlands cover a relatively small area of the Earth's surface, they are strongholds of biodiversity. Many are extremely rich in flora and fauna. Several have endemic species and virtually all contain species confined to wetlands. Wetland biodiversity throughout the world supports many economic activities, providing people with countless products that are harvested, bought, sold and bartered. Now, the cultural services of the wetlands include: wetlands deliver significant non-material benefits such as cultural, spiritual, aesthetic and educational services. They also provide opportunities for recreation and tourism, generating significant incomes that benefit local communities and national economies. Closely allied to the benefits of wetlands for recreation and well-being is their educational value. Wetlands, for example, peat bogs, are important for providing a historical legacy by preserving remains of great archaeological significance. Now, let us discuss the threats to wetlands. The Wildlife Institute of India survey reveals that 70 to 80% of individual freshwater marshes and lakes in the Gangetic floodplains have been lost in the 5 decades. At present, only 50% of India's wetlands remain. They are disappearing at a rate of 2 to 3% every year. Prior to the 1980s, wetlands were mainly converted to agricultural lands. Since the 1980s, it is estimated that over 80% of wetland losses are due to non-agricultural activities. The loss of wetlands leads to environmental and ecological problems, which have a direct impact on the socio-economic benefits of the associated populace. Now, the serious consequences of this includes increased flooding, species decline, deformity or extinction and decline in water quality. Wetlands are also important as a genetic reservoir for various species of plants, including rice, which is a staple food for 3/4 of the world's population. Now, what is wetland restoration? Maintaining only 15% of the land area of a watershed in wetlands can reduce flooding peaks by as much as 60%. Natural wetlands are so effective at removing pollutants from water that flows through them. Engineers and scientists construct systems that replicate some of the functions of natural wetlands. Wetlands are one of the most valuable and fragile components of a watershed, but for many years they were filled and drained for agriculture and development. Now, the wetland restoration, that is the renewal of natural and historical wetlands that have been lost, is a growing activity. It can improve water quality and wildlife habitat across the nation. Restoration is the return of a lost wetland or former wetland to its pre-existing naturally functioning condition, or a condition as close to that as possible. Why we need to restore wetlands? Restoring our lost wetlands to their natural state is essential to ensure the health of watersheds. Unless we reverse the tide of wetland loss, the quality of our waters will continue to be threatened and a part of our natural heritage will be lost. To carry out this restoration, there are 4 basic steps. Step 1. Treatment of invasive species. Step 2. Placement of clean sand and sediment. Step 3. Seeding and planting. Step 4. Maintenance and monitoring. Now, let us discuss the role of Ramsar Convention and mission for wetlands conservation. The Convention on Wetlands of international importance, especially as waterfowl habitat, commonly referred to as the Ramsar Convention from its place of adoption in Iran in 1971, was the first of the modern global intergovernmental treaties on conservation and wise use of natural resources. The mission of the Ramsar Convention is the conservation and wise use of wetlands by national actions and international cooperation as a means to achieving sustainable development throughout the world. The Convention provides a framework for international cooperation and was established following concerns in the 1960s about the serious decline in populations of waterfowl, mainly ducks. The 3 pillars of the Convention to designate suitable wetlands for the list of wetlands of international importance, that is Ramsar list, and ensure their effective management, to work towards the wise use of all their wetlands through national land use planning, appropriate policies and legislation, management actions and public education, and to cooperate internationally concerning transboundary wetlands, shared wetland systems, shared species and development projects that may affect wetlands. This was all about today's topic. Hope you have enjoyed it well. Thank you for watching.